Hello there, there you are. You've got Penny right over there. She's seeming to be settled down. Hopefully we'll see if she stays that way for this whole thing. Anyway, um, today I'd like to talk a little bit about habits and how they really, really play a major part into our lives and do a lot more than most people think do. Let's go back in ancient history, like all of like 4 months into New Year's resolutions and how many people scheduled it or had an idea for New Year's resolution and somehow thought that they were just going to do it, uh, willpower or whatever they thought they would, and it just doesn't work that way. So, with that preface, let me give you the quote, which might sort of put this more into context. Came from somebody named F.M. Alexander, who's apparently an Australian, which I don't know anything about, just found a quote, but I'm going to look more about him. But anyway, people do not decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. So let's think about this. People don't decide their futures, they decide their habits. It's your habits that essentially dictate the direction you're going to go. And if you say, oh, no, no, I can figure this one out, no, let's think about this. Let's take something like, well, eating or smoking. That's usually quite a good example. I like to use smoking. Even if you don't smoke, use this as an example. A lot of people want to stop smoking, but they have certain habits that they get into. For example, a lot of times they'll reach for a cigarette the first thing they do when they get up in the morning, or a cigarette after a meal, or some such thing like that. So they may say in their head that they want to give up the smoking, and they may have great intentions of doing so, but it's the habit. You have the meal, you reach for a cigarette. You get up in the morning, you reach for a cigarette. Those habits are so ingrained because people have been doing them for so long that this is an automatic response. Your body is actually wired to do these things. And so the hard part of changing things like stop smoking is to break those habits. If you want to lose weight, you're frequently people who are heavy tend to have certain habits in which they start, like, for example, if they get upset, they go for food, for comfort food, or a specific food or some such thing like that. You have certain habits that you do quite frequently, and you're not even aware that you're doing them. How many times have you done something and it's sort of like, why did I do that? And it turned out to be just purely a habit. So that when you're thinking about wanting to change your habits or you're wanting to do something, you need to change your habits to be able to accomplish that particular task. So let's go back to the smoking example. If somebody wants to stop smoking, say, I know this is going to go over like a lead balloon, but let's just go with the idea here. So if you tend to have a cigarette after a meal, when you finish a meal, decide instead of reaching for the cigarette, you'll get up and go do the dishes. It's not so much that you're getting the dishes done, it's what you're trying to do to break that habit. So that if you do something immediately after the meal instead of the prior behavior, you do it long enough, then you'll develop another habit, perhaps, of like getting up and doing the dishes, which may or may not be a bad thing, but that's beside the point. You decide on that. But then you start changing your wiring, your mental neural wiring, so that you develop some new habits. So if you want to go to bed earlier, you've got to figure out some kind of a habit to create that environment so that you start doing that. Does this make sense? Now, I'll give an example, a personal example in my own life, is that I wanted to get some more exercise in, and I was trying it at a variety of different times, and I knew I had to create a habit. My problem was is I couldn't figure out anything I wanted to connect it to or anything that would work. So there's certain things that I've started to do, or well, I had been doing, and so then one morning I said, well, wait a minute, I can do a couple of little exercises right now, and I did. And I said, okay, this is going to work. So essentially, what I tried to do is create a new habit, hooking two things together. This is called habit stacking. So when you have one established habit and you hook on another or start hooking on another habit to it, you build on that habit because then what happens is you, in a sense, like I use the example with smoking in the meal, you have the meal, that's a habit, and then you do something else after that meal. So that when you're thinking about these particular things, you connect those habits so that they become linked together so you continue to do those. So if you want to study more, you hook something up that instead of say, going to TV after you finish dinner, you go sit into another chair and pick up a school book. Now, the key here is going into the other chair, because the moment you go in and sit in the normal chair that you do to watch television, you're going to watch television. If you go into another chair, maybe even in another room, if you have that option, you have the better chance of developing a new habit. Okay. Now, this is one reason I tell people do not study at the dining room table or do not study in bed. You study in bed. Normally, when we go to bed, we go to sleep. So, this is one reason why people, when they say I can't study in bed or I fell asleep studying last night, it's because you probably were studying on the bed, because your habits of thinking about bed and sleep go together really, really tightly. So, you're trying to break that and do something else. So, go study maybe at the foot of the bed on the floor, maybe perhaps, or put some cushions down or find someplace else comfortable, or you're going to have to do something. Maybe if you have to, because it's your only space to study, maybe set your pillows and turn around and sit at the foot of the bed. That may perhaps could be enough to break that habit link in your head so that you might actually be able to stay on the bed. I would suggest, if at all possible, to try and do something different. But if you had to, because that was the only place you had to, try and do something different. Like I said, study at the foot of the bed. Don't study at the dining room table. Or if you do, sit in a place that's not your spot. Because normally when we eat at the table at home, we tend to have the chairs you go to, right? Everybody's got his or her chair. Don't study in that chair when you're at the dining room table. If you have to study at the dining room table, sit in another chair. Because I can guarantee you go to the table, you sit down, you start to study, within an hour, you're going to be eating something. Because you're at the dining room table, because you do it that instead of that chair, that's what you normally do. Okay. So that when we're going back to the quote, people do not decide their futures, their habits decide their future. So if you look at the habits in which you engage, you can see where you're going to go. So if you don't like certain behaviors, the idea is to cut that habit, to try and, or divert it, maybe not necessarily cut it, divert it, depending, again, so much depends on the situation, not necessarily cut it, divert it, depending, again, so much depends on the situation, and change what the habits are. Set up another habit to get you closer. Now, going back to what I said earlier about New Year's resolutions, that doesn't necessarily mean you can start up one day and say, okay, I want to change a new habit. You need to do this gradually, kind of like what I was talking about when I was talking about my getting involved in exercise. I had to find the already existing habit and to link on something onto that, and I had to do it gradually. And I've been doing this pretty much for the last 4 or 5 months based on this new change in habit. So I'm looking upon it favorably. So you've got to work on it a little bit. You can't just, in a sense, like many New Year's resolutions, I want to lose 50 pounds. I'm never going to eat another piece of ice cream again as long as I live. That's not going to work. If you say something like, instead of 2 cups of ice cream, I'll only have one, or, instead of 3 cookies, I'll have two, start maybe using those habits, but modifying them to go in the direction you want to go. Does this make sense? Does this help? Can you see where I'm going? Because if you start looking at the habits you've got, how you want to modify them in the direction you want to go, you're more likely to be successful. And you need to do it in small segments too. Again, like I said, it can be done to go hog wild and get it done all at once, but that's usually has some level of trauma with it. And that trauma doesn't necessarily mean really big. It just kind of means there's something in there that it's going to make an impact on your mind. Well, okay, I just had a thought and I'll share it. I don't know if you can see it. Well, anyway, way back when in ancient history, when I was maybe 10, I was playing with a friend, and my brother and she, and we were in her garage. Her father had just built that garage. There was nothing in it, nothing, not even a room. So, and it was cold. This was January thereabouts. I think it was, I want to even say it was New Year's, but I won't swear to that. So we were going through, and she went in first. My brother went after her, and I went in to follow them in the side door, not the big garage door, in the side door. And I put my hand out, and I don't know if you can see it right here, right there. And ended up breaking a pane of glass and getting, it started to bleed like crazy. Um, to this day, I do not go through doors by putting my hand on the glass pane. I'll put it on the frame. there's a crossbar, put on the crossbar, or I will back through. If I put my hand on the glass door, I literally have to talk myself into it. Say something like, I've just watched 10 people go through this. It's happened there. I've known this door. It's been there for 50 years, blah, 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 blah. So that one instance basically, in a sense, established a habit in which I don't put my hand on glass doors when I want to go through them. You can't see it right now, but the scar still is right there. But anyway, just trust me. You can't see it probably on the YouTube, but it's still there. And that was decades ago, and it still impacts my behavior. So this is what I mean when I say that you can do things and change habits, but it tends to be somewhat traumatic. Um, so hopefully you're not going to have to go through something traumatic. Hopefully. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I hope you understood where I was coming from. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'll either try and answer the questions or go into more detail or whatever it is that you need me to tell you. So let me know. I would really appreciate it. And she at least didn't fall asleep on me. Okay, you take care, and I have you a good week, and we will chat with you later. Bye.